Alright guys, we're going to start a new chapter, and this chapter is going to be about the integumentary system. In this video we're going to cover just the first couple of objectives, just kind of an intro to the system. And so at this point we're moving on in our organization of life. So we've covered the cell level, we know that cells make up tissues, we've covered the tissue level, and now we're ready to get into the organ and the organ system level. So our first system, it's going to be the integumentary system, or the integumentary system, however you want to say it. And so the first objective is just going to be going over some basics. So what are the main functions? What are the basic structures and organs? And so there are several functions to the integumentary system. One very important one is going to be protection, because our integumentary system is primarily going to be our skin. And so in terms of protection, it's going to protect us in a variety of ways. So our skin is constantly taking a beating. We're constantly coming into contact with things that are outside of our bodies. We may, have scrapes and bumps and cuts and things like that, and so it protects us from abrasion. It protects us from chemicals, things like acids or other chemicals that could be damaging to our tissues. It protects us from UV light. That's going to be really important in protecting us from that harmful radiation. It protects us from pathogens. It's going to be one of our first lines of defense. It's going to keep those bacteria and viruses out, hopefully. It's also going to help hold water in and help keep us from dehydrating. It's also going to function in sensation. And so in our skin, there are lots of sensory receptors. There are heat receptors, touch receptors, stretch receptors, pain receptors, all different types. And so there's going to be a relationship here with the nervous system. And we have many, many, many different types of sensory receptors or sensory cells. And some of these will be mentioned as we move through the lesson. Some are only going to be mentioned here. But they're kind of grouped over here for you. So some of your pressure receptors are going to be things like your Ruffini's endings, Pacinian corpuscles, Krause's end bulbs. The Ruffini endings also help with like stretch receptors. And then you have your fine touch, like your Merkel disc, your root hair plexus, Meissner's corpuscle. All of those are going to help us, when we put our hands on something or we touch things or with our feet, or you feel something land on you like a bug. Okay, all of those are going to be your touch receptors. And then we have our temperature and pain receptors, which are going to be those free nerve endings, and they can help us sense hot, cold, and obviously if something that is hurtful, we're going to recognize that through those nerve endings. And so here's just the same couple of more diagrams that go over the different receptors, and you can kind of see where they are. Those free nerve endings kind of come up close to the surface of the skin there. A lot of your touch receptors are going to be deeper into the skin, down there in the hypodermis. Some are going to be here in the dermis, like your Merkel disc are going to be right here in the lower end of our epidermis there. And so all different types of receptors are going to help us sense our surroundings. Some other important functions are temperature regulation. We've got sweat glands, and then the blood vessels that go within our skin are going to help us to cool down when we need to, or possibly warm up. The sun, when we're exposed to the sunlight, it helps us produce vitamin D. Now, the full process is not going to be in our skin, but it does begin in the skin, and so that's going to be one purpose, is vitamin D production. And your skin can also be an excretory organ, so when we secrete sweat, there are small amounts of metabolic waste that can come out of our sweat. So another function is excretion. Now, some of the main organs, there's really one main organ, the largest organ in your body, and that's going to be your skin, that outer boundary, that outer barrier that protects us. But we also have some accessory structures like the hair and the nails that are on our skin or within our skin. And then we have a couple of important glands. We have sweat glands, also known as sudoriferous glands, as well as sebaceous glands, which are oil glands. And so just the basic structure of the integumentary system, we're actually going to see this over and over and over. And this is something that you absolutely need to understand, the position. You also need to understand your anatomical terms like superficial and deep. Because when we're talking about the skin, it goes from the surface, the outermost surface, which is the most superficial that you can be, and it goes deeper into the body. And so because we are going to be talking about a lot of different layers within layers, we definitely need to understand what superficial means and what deep means. And so the outermost layer, or the most superficial layer, is called the epidermis. And epi means like on or upon, and so the epidermis is going to sit upon the dermis, which is going to be our middle layer. And these two are actually the ones that make up our skin. Okay, we do have another layer that makes up our integumentary system, but these two are the actual skin. The hypodermis, which hypo means below, the hypodermis does not actually comprise the skin. It's going to be connective tissue. It's mostly going to be fat that we know as adipose. And so which of the following is not a function of the integumentary system? Or not a function? So we've got temperature regulation, yes. Protection, definite yes. Vitamin E production, that would be no, because it is vitamin D that we make with the help of the integumentary system. And then sensation, that's a definite yes. So the answer is going to be C. All right, objective 2 is just going to be a precursor to objective 3. So we're going to look at the two skin layers and the hypodermis and kind of just focus on their general functions. And then the next objective is going to go into the specific structure and the layers within the layers. So once again, the epidermis is going to be your outermost superficial layer. It's the one that's going to be exposed to the environment around us, and so it's definitely going to be very big in protection. It's also going to be that boundary that helps to keep water inside and keep us from getting dehydrated. And in objective 3, we're going to look at the 4 or 5 layers, really 5 layers, but some only have 4. We're going to look at the 5 layers that make up the epidermis. Now in the middle we have our dermis, and our dermis is the deepest layer of the skin itself. And what its job is to provide nourishment to the epidermis. So when we covered tissues, we learned that epithelial tissue is non-vascular. And so our epidermis is made up of epithelial tissue, which means it doesn't have blood vessels running through it. If you look at the picture over here, the blood vessels are only down here in the dermis. And so one of the dermis's responsibility is going to be to provide those nutrients and oxygen and things that those tissues need from the blood. It's going to supply those upper layers of the epidermis. So the dermis is going to help nourish the epidermis. It's also where you're going to find a lot of protein fibers like collagen and elastin, and so it's going to be responsible for giving the skin kind of its tough, elastic strength. Now the dermis has 2 layers, and we'll look at those in objective 3. And then once again, we have the hypodermis. Remember that is not part of the skin, but its job is going to be to cushion and insulate because it is primarily made of fat. And so another word for that is subcutaneous. Cutaneous referred to those skin membranes, and then sub means below. So the hypodermis and the subcutaneous layer, it literally means below the skin. All right, so we're going to stop there, and we are going to cover objective 3 in our next video.